afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here today. So the way we'll run this session is we'll first have a quick presentation on the future of programmatic advertising, some trends that are shaping the programmatic ecosystem, and then move on to have a fireside chat with Jay Pankaj from Procter & Gamble. So to give you a sense of the programmatic advertising landscape, moving on to the next slide. If you look at the current state of the programmatic ecosystem, if you look at some of the graphs on the next slide, you get a sense that programmatic has formed a major chunk of the digital ad spending ecosystem in the last couple of years, moving right from about 50% or so to almost 70% plus. If you look at the stats on the next slide, while globally this has been the case, in Asia Pacific and specifically in India, we see that there is still a lot of room for growth because Asia Pacific contributes only to about 5% of the total programmatic ad ecosystem. And even within India, the share of spends of programmatic in the total digital ad spends is in the range of only about 20 to 22%. So there is a lot of scope for growth in both of this region and in India as a market. Next slide. Let's dive into some of the trends in the programmatic ecosystem. The first one being the video on demand or the OTT phenomena that we are seeing. So if you look at some of the trends that have shaped this phenomena, next slide. The OTT ecosystem has completely changed our world order, right? If you look at from a couple of years back when linear TV used to form the mainstay of our content consumption, our entire content consumption has now moved to OTT apps with mobile or tablets as the primary screen, and with most of the content coming from either the TV networks or the content providers themselves like a Prime or a Netflix or a Hotstar. In addition to this, this is also being streamed on, the whole connected and smart TV ecosystem with the same kind of, apps and content being streamed there. Now, if you look at the next slide, you'll see that this content is being consumed both in short form and in long form, right? Short form content is governed more by micro moments, more snackable content, which is more mobile first, usually in the form of vertical videos. And more personalized to mobile as a screen, whereas long form content is driven more by multi-screens across mobile and TV. It is led by a subscription model usually, and it is usually original content, again personalized because now both of the mobile and the TV devices have become personalized to us. So given this, moving to the next slide. You'll see from some of the data here that the video on demand wave is essentially become completely mobile first, with nearly all the viewers owning a smartphone, right? So whether it is different demographics of age or gender or location from, right from urban to rural households, it's sort of an omnipresent wave when it comes to video on demand. Next slide. What this means for advertising is that you need to look at then things like what's the buying mechanism? Is it open exchange? Is it private deal that you want to go for? What is the measurement types? What are the ad formats? Right? What is the right length of the video when you're thinking of video on demand programmatic? All of these parameters become extremely important from an advertising standpoint. Going into the next section, let's look at the next trend, right? The second trend, which is the header bidding phenomena. Now, what is header bidding, right? If you see in the next few slides, you'll see that header bidding is essentially, it can be called pre-bidding, it can be called audience bidding, simultaneous bidding. There's a lot of terms being used for it, but essentially it's an advanced programmatic technique where publishers can sort of offer their inventory in an equal opportunity sort of way to multiple exchanges and SSPs. And this allows them to obviously maximize their yields and also gives them more control. So if you look at the next slide, vis-a-vis the waterfall model, which was the traditional model of inventory allocation, where it would go from one exchange to the next network and so on in a sequential way, the header bidding model is focused much more on real-time data, on user data, and also looking at giving an equal auction opportunity to all the exchanges and DSPs. Let's go to the next slide. What are the benefits of header bidding from a buyer standpoint? There are three core benefits, right? It offers disintermediation because now you have equal access and sort of a fair and true mechanism to access the inventory of a publisher and reach those premium audiences. It gives access to quality audiences and at scale because now every exchange and every SISP can actually access that inventory in a unified auction. So you are not sort of looking at inventory after someone has taken away the quality users or the high value users. And of course, transparency, right? Because it gives increased visibility into the entire supply and makes supply planning far easier. Going into the next phenomena, the third one is the trend of supply path optimization or SPO, right, which is again around transparency. Now, if you look at the next few slides, you'll see that the ecosystem has been extremely complex with multiple SSPs, multiple resellers of the same inventory, leading to a lot of duplicate bidding, leading to increased infra costs, increased DSP fees, a lot of additional cost spent to get to the end inventory and end user. What supply path optimization will allow us to do, or the push is going to help us with, is providing that end user transparency and the end supply transparency. So if you look at the next slide, you see the benefits of SPO and empowering advertisers are really around one, of course, transparency brings much more cost efficiencies. Second is around the inventory quality itself, right? It enables access to high quality inventory as a result of the fact that you can implement different things like ads.txt, sellers.json, which removes any kind of unauthorized sellers or any kind of fraud traffic of the inventory. And of course, it's banks on trusted partnerships with the right exchanges and SSPs to get you that access to inventory. Coming to the next one, this is the last trend that I'll talk about, is about the whole data side of things, right? And where the world is moving. And if you think about, some of the things that are transpiring on the cookie side of the world, on the iOS ecosystem, you'll see that, we're headed into a very different world when it comes to data. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see that with the deprecation of cookies, third-party cookies rather, which has been announced by Google from 2022, it does impact advertising in a big way because third-party cookies had a big role to play when it comes to identifying audiences, targeting audiences, measuring ROI, and so on. And the call has essentially been taken to improve privacy and compliance on the web. Similarly, if you look at the iOS ecosystem on the next slide, the whole iOS ecosystem is about to change because Apple has announced that it's going to bring in changes to the whole app tracking side of things, where every user needs to provide permission and opt in for every app before they can be tracked, right? So this again brings about changes on the IDFA side of things, which is used in the iOS ecosystem. What this means for advertisers, right? If you look at the next slide, you'll see that this essentially impacts the entire chain from identification and targeting of audiences, things like retargeting, things like personalized targeting, in the optimization itself, right? Because things like frequency capping and ad rotation were dependent on some of these identifiers. And of course, attribution and identifying the ROI of a media channel, because again, attribution banks on some of these identifiers. So how do we go about and look at tackling this, right? And what are some of the things to keep in mind? If you look at the last slide, before we go into a discussion with Jay, there are some things that advertisers can think of. One is looking at alternate identifiers. What is it that you can use? What is things around location and IP addresses? There are universal ID investments being made by different players in the ecosystem. Looking at multi-touch attribution, as an option. And similarly, from an advertiser lens, investing in your first-party data. How do you build out that first-party user store, your DMP, so that you are fairly well prepared and less impacted to run, these campaigns in a new world. So with that, I'd like to invite Jay Pankaj on stage. He heads marketing technology and data sciences at PNG. And we'll spend the next 15 or 20 minutes getting to hear Jay's thoughts on some of the questions on the programmatic ecosystem. Hi, Jay. Welcome.
Hi, Vasudha. Hello, everybody.
Great. So, Jay, we just finished talking a little bit about the trends which are shaping the programmatic ecosystem. Would love to get your thoughts on a couple of things around just the state of adoption of programmatic in India, and what do you see as some of the barriers to adoption on the programmatic side?
Yeah, thanks, Vasudha. So, programmatic, I think we are still in early stages, and some of the numbers that you shared earlier would suggest that we are about 15% of the digital fee spent through programmatic, is very revealing compared to the 70-80% that we see in other markets which are more mature. But I think this trend is only going to grow, and sooner than later, we will be able to catch up with the numbers that we see in other markets. Now, if I think about what are the key barriers that we see in the market in terms of exploding and expanding programmatic faster, there are about 4 or 5. The first one is just awareness. So when we talk about programmatic in India, it's largely limited to the experience that you get on some of the larger platforms like Google. But if you look at the open programmatic or the open internet, and how you can access the inventory that is there, how you can access the audiences that are there on the open internet outside of the Google system, that awareness is fundamentally very, very low. And once that changes, both on the publisher side and the advertiser side, I think the programmatic numbers will really take off from there that point on. So that's number one. The second one is the quality inventory. So I think it's very, very important that the audiences that you can access to programmatic, they can be pre-identified to a large extent based on their behavior, based on some of the other signals. And so a brand which wants to access a certain kind of audience is able to do that in a more or less accurate way. So that having the right inventory and opening up more of the publisher inventory to programmatic is going to be very key to growing programmatic in India. The third one is, of course, flows from the awareness, but just the fundamental openness to sharing data. I think there is a lot of apprehension for very valid reasons as to what may happen with the data of publishers once they start joining the programmatic bandwagon, particularly on the open programmatic or open internet side. And we need to do enough to reassure and to make the practices visible on what our various people doing in the chain on safeguarding and guaranteeing that the data is not going to be misused. The other one that I want to call out is, of course, there are different buying mechanisms on programmatic. There's the real-time bidding, you can do programmatic guarantee. You can also do PMP deals. Now, each have their own pros and cons. I don't want to go into those details, but how can we get into a world where we are doing more PMPs, where we are doing more RTBs, so that it really becomes the auction-led model that it is designed to do. And lastly is the measurement framework. Right? So how do we, once advertisers advertise in programmatic, how do we ensure that the way we measure success is well thought through? Because just taking the age-old ways in which we have measured our success in the past and repeating that in the programmatic platform may not be the right recipe for us to scale programmatic going forward. So in a sense, those are the 4 or 5 reasons to recap. Just the awareness, then the availability of quality inventory, openness to data sharing, the various buying models in terms of more share of real-time bidding and PMP deals, and lastly, being very clear on how do you measure the success of a programmatic campaign. Those are the 5 things that are going to be very important for us to go further.
Sure. Thanks, Jay. So you mentioned these 5 aspects. Also want to understand a little bit around, how strong a role does the whole transparency aspect play when it comes to programmatic buying? What more do you think that exchanges or publishers can do from a transparency lens to enhance that experience for advertisers?
Right, Vasudha. So, as advertisers, when we advertise on any medium, whether it is programmatic or any other medium, what we most foremost want to do is to have some kind of a proof of performance. That ad was delivered. The ad was delivered to the intended audience. And of course, there are mechanisms to be able to do that by placing the right set of vast repaid tags, what have you. And as long as we are doing that, there is performance coming back, and it's reassuring that we're meeting some of the objectives that we set out to meet. In terms of what else can be done as we go forward in terms of transparency, I think there are two real things that I would call out. One is what's the what's the final dollar amount or the rupee amount that is being paid at various points in the chain, right? And that sometimes is not fully transparent from an advertiser perspective. And of course, that would help very much, as you were also alluding to, in things like header bidding or supply path optimization. Corollary to that is how can we know exactly what the DSP is paying to the publisher, right? So that's just a subset of it. But those are the 2 points that I think we need to work on to improve the transparency. But aside from that, of course, some publishers are more open than others in allowing the vast and repaid tags to be available and to be put. But that's definitely like almost a precondition on table stakes for us to go ahead and find improvement.
Sure. Understand. So you're saying that basically the technologies around header bidding, stuff around supply path optimization, and also looking at some of these verification tags, them being implemented in the right way on publishers can all help with the transparency aspect in programmatic. So
Yeah, absolutely.
switching gears a little bit, Jay. So, as of course, a champion on the data side of things as well. What role do you think data-driven marketing is playing in programmatic? Right? How different is it from the world of the non-programmatic side of things, and how does data make this whole programmatic ecosystem better?
Yeah, I think the proposition that programmatic has is very simple and very clear. We know that behavioral audiences outperform demographic audiences, and programmatic allows you to do in ways that no other platform can allow you to do. And that's why being sharper in your targeting, understanding the behaviors that your target segment has exhibited in the past by consuming different media or their purchase behavior, allows you to be far more sharp-shooted in how you access audiences and how you engage with consumers. So definitely the proposition on data-driven marketing is completely there. There's absolutely no two ways about the benefits of programmatic through use of data-driven marketing.
Understand. And we earlier talked about how some of the changes in the ecosystem around cookies, around IDFA, obviously impacts the ability of an advertiser to identify and target an audience. So how do you think we should be preparing for that change? What is the impact on ability to deliver your brand's outcomes, and how should we be planning for this in the medium to long term?
Yeah, I like to think about it in 3 ways. Really, first, I think the cookie deprecation on the Google side is still a year away or so. And really, in the digital world, 6 months to a year and a half is a very, very long time for us to achieve a lot, right? And what we want to focus on as a company is making sure that we maximize the time that we have and take from there. So that's number one. But of course, we have to prepare for the eventuality. I'm confident that given the size and the scale of the business, this ad tech business, multi-billion dollar, we will find equally robust ways in keeping with the spirit of the change that we are witnessing. We will find equally robust ways to access audiences, right? It may not be the way that we've accessed in the past, maybe something different. but we definitely will find a way to and embrace that in future. But the last point, and most importantly, is I think that also raises the importance of first-party data, and you were alluding to that a little bit. How do we, as advertisers, at the same time as we do some partnerships, but also identify all the touch points or platforms that we have or can create where we can start getting more first-party data, so that we can build that repository of audiences going forward as well.
No, that's a fair observation, and like you rightly said, I think first-party data will play a big role. Which brings me also to the point, because you obviously also lead data sciences. So, what will be the role of what do you see the role of data sciences and this whole ML AI wave being in programmatic media buying, right? Especially since some of these identifiers evolve over a period of time.
Yeah, I think the role of programmatic, the role of AI, ML, or data science is going to be even stronger in the future. And really, there are two areas, if I may call out. First of all, the right to win for data science in ad tech is very, very huge, because data science feeds on enormity of data and velocity of data, right? So large amounts of data coming at you at a very breakneck pace. There are two places where I see data science playing a huge, huge role. One is it in buying. So how do you identify what's the right combination of audience, platform, publisher, creative, format, frequency, time of day? So there are these many variables that are at play when you want to maximize the outcome that you're seeking to achieve. And data science has the ability to almost identify the right combination of the sweet spot amongst all these 700 variables. The second one is, of course, in informing the right audiences, right? So, of course, a lot of the audiences is data-driven, but out of those audiences, how do you sub-select or create a subset that you can go after more meaningfully to create engagement with consumers and wow for our consumers? Then the second part is, aside from buying the audience, is really in using impression data. Impression data is just for everybody, the data that is coming back after you've served someone an ad. And there's a ton of information in the impression data that can allow us to select what's the right platform to work with, what's the right strategy going forward. It creates really a virtuous loop for us to maximize the ROI on programmatic ad spending. So yeah, those are the two areas broadly speaking, but data science has a huge, huge role to play and a huge right to win in programmatic.
Understand. So that possibly brings me to the last question, and a slightly different question, right? I think we talked about a couple of trends that are shaping the future. The fact that data science, ML, and AI will have an even stronger role to play. Um, Switching gears a little bit again, what do you think of the whole connected TV and smart TV wave in India? We obviously know that video on demand is a big thing, and we've seen the whole OTT world order change. How do you see the role of connected TV shape up in India? I mean, markets in the West, connected TV is already a big part of programmatic video buying. What role do you think that will play in the next couple of months, quarters in India?
Yeah, I think it's going to grow in its salience and in its prominence. We have to look no further than China to see some of the trends emerging in China. So it's going to only grow. And as for advertisers, I think it is important for us to be where the viewers are going to be, so that we can stay engaged, we can stay connected. There are many audiences today that are no longer on what in the West we call network television. Right? The only way you can find them is either on an OTT platform or some of the other streaming platforms. And that's why it is very, very important that we go where the viewer is going to be, where the consumers are going to be, where the shoppers are going to be. I think the other thing that will become even more important, I think you touched on that as well in your talk, is cross-screen deduplication and measurement. Right? So how do we look at the entire gamut of touch points, including network activity, OTT, and the rest of digital, and understand who we've reached, how many times we've reached them, and create a unified panel for measurement.
Great. I understand. So basically, it will, of course, also boil down to then looking at cross-device measurement, attribution, the entire chain, right? Because as consumers start spending more time across multiple screens.
Absolutely, Vasudha.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Chair. I think we're done with our questions. Thank you again for joining us. And thanks, everyone. It was lovely being here today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.